Just a few words about the EWIP, which is the acronym for the Episcopal Women's History Project. It is an organization that we heartily ask you to join and be part of us. You'll receive a newsletter, and you'll get to, if you are a person who is working on a project that can't move forward without some financial help, we consider those things, and we are in the habit of giving grants. So think about this as you're going through this, and you're welcome to email me or anyone on the board, and we'll talk to you about this and get you the materials you need. Today we're going to hear from Barbara Bradley. Barbara's a retired critical care and diabetes educator, an RN, living in Wilmington, Delaware. She's active at Calvary Episcopal Church and the Brandywine Collaborative Ministries, where she coordinates pastoral requests, and she is active on many, many levels of the church, like chalice bearing, lay Eucharistic minister, and altar guild. Just she's there helping. So she is going to talk to us and give us the story of Deaconess Marion Brown, who and she'll talk to you a little bit about what a deaconess is also. And she studied to be a deaconess and had her amazing life was among the Indians in the Southwest for nearly 30 years. Barbara, I will pass the baton to you and ask you to begin. Anyone who has a question, if you would write it in the chat room, we will try to, we hopefully will have time at the end, and we will try to answer it, and Barbara will address it. Thank you. Barbara, I don't think I think you're muted. Can Barbara be unmuted?
I think Yane can.
I can.
Can you unher Yane? Yane, can you undo Barbara?
She has to unmute herself, Barbara.
How do we get her to do that?
On the bottom left of your screen, Barbara, would you unmute yourself?
She has to do it herself, right?
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, all right, I found it. It doesn't show on the screen that I have up here.
Okay, that's great.
So I'm delighted to share this information, and you'll see why I have a particular interest in this wonderful lady. So next slide. And this is a photo of Deaconess Marion Brown with her lifespan listed there, born and died in Delaware. She was the oldest of 8 siblings, 4 sisters, 3 brothers. 2 of the brothers died in childhood. She was my husband's paternal aunt. She was the oldest. Yeah. And I first met her at summer family gatherings, and I loved to chat with her. She was so interesting. And every time I saw her, she was wearing this uniform. And she wore it all the time. I never saw her in anything different. Next slide. Our local newspaper, the Morning News, on a Saturday in 1972, highlighted her in this article as she returned to Delaware after she retired from working with the Indians. So her job was basically like a missionary and a little bit of social work. Next slide. So a little bit about the deaconess history. In 1889, the General Convention passed a canon on deaconesses that recognized their ministry. They set standards and qualifications for those deaconesses, and they served in places of poverty, inner cities, swamps, and mountains. Next. These are some of the tasks that were assigned. So they were, teaching, almost, like a Bible school situation, having classes about the faith, preparing others for baptism or confirmation, and caring for the women and children. So there was a little bit of social work going on there too. Next slide. So the limitations there with this particular group of deaconesses was that they weren't allowed to function liturgically. But in 1970, they were allowed to be ordained as deacons. And all the deaconesses then were automatically assumed into the diaconate. But Marian refused to do that. Next slide. The first deaconess school programs were started in Philadelphia and New York, and she attended the one in Philadelphia since it was the closest to Delaware. The 1930 US Census shows that 18 boarding ladies were in that particular program in that location. And in her program in Philadelphia, they were from 10 different states, and one was from Canada. Let's see if I have the next slide. Just bear with me. Okay, so this next slide. Yeah, this is the address of that particular school. It's no longer, the building was even removed or torn down. But they're in the 41st annual report of that program, this is where I found her name. So they had, classes in religious training, Bible service, pastoral care, social work. Next slide. So she graduated in 1931, and this is the list of the people. So it's an alphabetical list of those who actually graduated. I don't know what happened to the other number of students, but she's listed here as second. And then, of course, this little blurb says where they went, which I thought was interesting because one went to this Virginia school in the Blue Ridge area, Virginia, and Marian was sent to St. John's House for social work and postgraduate work. The next lady went to help with kindergarten. Next slide. This lady went to United Thank Offering work in her home diocese. And Miss Bessie Smith, missionary to China, which I thought, well, that's interesting. I didn't know that they had sent them off that far. Next slide. So after graduation, she was encouraged by a friend. She was encouraged by a friend who said that people go to the Indians, but they don't stay. And so this followed after her doing the work, social work at St. John's. So she decided to go to the Indians, and first they sent her off to Wyoming. She decided the people were beautiful as well, and Wyoming was beautiful, and she decided to stay for a while. Next. So she spent 7 years in Wyoming at St. Michael's Mission with the Araphoe. This is at the Wind River Reservation And I had a little trouble trying to pronounce this name of the town or area. And anyway, it's Ethete or Ethete, Wyoming, is how it was presented to me. So that was information from the 1940 census. So people started asking her if they could come into the church where she was working. And she recalled that one of the women said, "We must see Jesus in you, because if we don't see him in you, we don't see him at all." She was also available for births at all hours and for family sheltering. So we'll do the next slide. I think I've forgotten which slide number I'm on, but anyway. Oh, the other thing I wanted to say about that was that she didn't have to invite them into the church. They just kept coming. She told them, just show up. Next. Often her home became a refuge for the women and their families who needed safe space when the husbands had too much to drink. From my history classes and information about the Indians, it seems there's a genetic difference or something in their makeup where the men, having even one drink causes a problem. So, but she said anyway, in spite of that we shouldn't really condemn the men for drinking, but we should condemn society that has them between cultures. And which is the real enemy, the business suit or the Indian headdress? So the men were caught between expectations of the tribe and the expectations of American culture, which caused them to be, upset and stressed many times. And drinking was the result of that. Next. I thought I'd include a little bit about the Indians, the differences between the two tribes that she spent time with. So this was a ceremonial dress, which I thought they did. In movies, we see the Indians, shown with all these headdresses and all the time, and that's not really how they lived all the time. They just use that for ceremonies. Next. This is a ceremonial female. Oops. Don't know why that's an empty slide, but scan to the next one. So this is contemporary dress for the Araphoe. Next. And I thought I'd include some of that scenery. She just thought all that was beautiful, and that was one of the reasons. Another reason why she decided to stay. So the photos here are the Rockies, the Elk, and the Grand Tetons. So next slide. Then she was off to Arizona, and that was in 1946. Next. So there's some photos these were highlighted in an article from the Executive Committee of the National Conference of Deaconesses in 1949. So she's here. A little difficult to expand just that photo, but there she is with, she's one of the workers among the Navajo. And so the next picture there is with working one of the family members. Next, we have, now I've included a lot of her activities throughout the years, as she was quite a busy lady. And so from this report about from the deaconesses, and she was listed as a provincial representative of the national conferences of deaconesses. And in 46 in Arizona, she was a member of the Committee for Publicity and Promotion. So next. And she was in 48, so she's at the Good Shepherd Mission in Fort Defiance, Arizona. And when I first met her, and she was telling me about their missionary work, and she'd said she had recently been in Fort Defiance. So she provided religious education and in church school throughout the year, had weekly classes in winter, daily Bible schools in the summer, had planned the girls' camp for teen group, and they seemed to be having a lot of fun. They all enjoyed that, and including the Young People's Fellowship that she established. And she coordinated a women's auxiliary that had 90 members. I was like, wow, that's great. So next. She wrote, it's our aim to reach every person in our communion who is not connected with another communion and bring them to a realization of our Lord and the more abundant life he came to give. Next. So summer 47 and winter 48, she was in charge of the work of the students sent to the district by the Student Field Service. So they were basically doing some intern work with her. And in January, the National Council brought her east to attend a conference for youth at Seabury House, Greenwich. She was getting around, I say. Other activities, she was at the annual conference for deaconesses, and it was noted that no, she was not at this conference because it was noted that she was very busy in Gallup, New Mexico. So she didn't particularly attend that one. And I guess she had been expected. That's why they made this note. So, but she was in the northern part of the state working very hard, and she had no time to write reports or make visits for meetings. And that was her note, part of her letter that she sent while she wasn't attending. So in 1950, she spent a week at the Deaconess House in Chicago. So, and speaking there, and also in Wisconsin about her work at Fort Defiance. So in 1951, there was an article established in Fourth magazine about her work. And I expect that was another journal from the church, but I could not find, when I was doing my research, I couldn't find any information about that particular publication. Next slide, at Good Shepherd Mission in Fort Defiance. These were establishing boys and girls clubs. Here she set up a night of games for the children, teaching them how to play, as only Indian men played games, and the women and children were not doing that, just the men. So she met regularly with the women. She taught the women how to run the program without her because she knew at some point she was going to be leaving them. And they officially accepted her into the Navajo Black Goat Clan. And I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but this is the Navajo name that they gave her. But it means successful in war. I don't know what war she was doing there, but I went. Okay, so I skipped a few. I went too fast on my own. So next slide just covers the years from 53 to 56 and things that she was doing. And these were all part of the the deaconesses organizations. So she was quite a busy woman. So Navajo, a ceremonial dress is what I included here. And the next slide is contemporary. So on the left, where the ladies are there, that's part of a fashion show. And then I just love this picture of these young boys with their hats. They seem to have been involved in a rodeo where the ladies were just on the runway. It looks like the few men were in that, but mostly it said it was all ladies doing the fashion show. So next, included some Arizona scenery here. Very, very picturesque. So there was the Celeste River is one of them. And then there's the Sedona and Desert Rock. Quite amazing. I think for me, it's like beautiful scenery architecture created by our creator. Next slide. from 60 to 67, she was functioning as the secretary for their national organization. And did that also, and then became part of their executive committee. So at this time also, some of the discussion was starting about the future of the Deaconess program. And she had a few different ideas about what she thought the Deaconess program might be in the future, which, as we'll see later, she didn't quite agree with. And then by 68, she was beginning to think about retiring, and the Indian tribe did not want her to leave. So they created, I thought this was cute, they created a petition to keep her there, but she was ready to retire. So on her 20th anniversary with them, they gave her that beautiful woven rug that I talked about that was hanging on her wall. And I never did see the rest of that. But anyway, so she hung it on the wall of her Delaware apartment when she came back to Delaware. And she decided that the high altitude of 17,000 feet was eventually going to affect her health. That was another reason she wanted to retire. And all I have to say is I wish I had a photo of a painting that they gave her, the proposition of ours that mentions this painting of Mary and the Christ child. And it was painted by an Indian woman at that particular mission. And it's depicted that Madonna and child, but as Indians, because they said that God is in the image of the people. And which I thought was quite an interesting thing to say. Anyway, I wish I had a photo of that one, but I don't. Next slide. She was quite an advocate for a lot of people. She said that, and a little bit of culture shock when she returned from after that almost 30 years working with the American Indians. So back to the mid-Atlantic coast. She said that sadly, on returning to the coast, she noticed that many people had no love or consideration about other races. Well, in 1967 and 68, if anybody remembers some of that history, there was quite a lot of racial issues going on the East Coast and probably all over the country. We had people protesting all over the place. And I remember I was in nursing school at the time, and we had to have escorts to the hospital because of the some race riots and a lot of the upset that was going on after Martin Luther King was assassinated. But she says, if you work with other races, you can begin to see people as people. Pardon my getting a little bit nostalgic, but when I would hear her talk about this, I just felt so bad for the people that were being ignored. And she said, we must first see people as God's people. And I really, truly believe that. And she also said, when we learn to understand, then we learn to love. And many of us still see that is not taking place today. Oops, I did it again. I went too fast. So in retirement, there was no rocking chair or knitting for Marian. She's back in Delaware. She gets busy again. So she was busy teaching 2 Bible classes for the elderly at a home of merciful rest. And I will have a photo of that coming up. And another for various age groups at Calvary Episcopal Church in Northern Delaware, which is now my home church and part of the Brandywine Collaborative Ministries. Next slide. This is a photo of Calvary. So she taught Sunday school classes there. She organized summer Bible schools. Some of her former class students from Sunday school fondly remember her, and especially for bringing chocolate-covered ants and crickets to the Sunday school class. Because when I first mentioned it to a few members, a couple of them that had her for Sunday school class started giggling. And that's when it came up about the chocolate covered ants and crickets. This is the home of, originally called the Home of the Merciful Rest. And this is not too far from Calvary and not too far from where she was living near the church, but has now been referred to as Kentmere Nursing Home. And then this is still standing as a nursing home. When I went there as a student, one of the director of nurses remembered my own mother at my birth, which has nothing to do with Marian, but anyway, I thought it was funny. Next slide. So we're at the end of her journey. And the Episcopal News Service had an article posted in 1990 when she died. And the Deaconess Marion Brown ministered to the Native Americans in Western United States for more than 25 years. Died on May 11 of heart failure at Episcopal Church Home, Hockessin, Delaware. Miss Brown, 88 years old, had been a social worker in Philadelphia for 7 years before being named a deaconess in the church in 1939. So part of that is incorrect information, since we have documentation in 1931 for her graduating as a deaconess. And then it was after that that she worked in social work. And then she was sent to Wyoming in 1939. And her only surviving brother, Samuel Brown Sr., was my father-in-law. And it was interesting to note, his birthday was May 11, and she died on May 11. Next slide. So a tribute, church officials identified Deaconess Marion Brown as the last surviving member of the Deaconess Order, and which has since been discontinued by the Episcopal Church. And Miss Brown ministered to the Navajo and Araphoe tribes prior to retiring in 1968. She was, her final resting place is in Pennsylvania, however, very close to where several of her other family members were buried there, and she's buried in a plot that's next to her mother, who was Florence Talley Brown. Next. At the Lambeth Conference in 1968, resolutions and reports, this is where she began to have disagreement with the church making these changes of moving from the deaconess schools to the deacon programs, the ordained deacons that we have now. So let me go right back to that. Yeah, and as I said earlier, there were a lot of people who, some of the deaconesses already existing at that time when the change was made were basically grandfathered into the deacon program as we know it today. And she decided she didn't want to do that. And I remember having, in some of my chats with her at family gatherings, she would confide in me about how she felt about that change. Because she truly, growing up, attending the deaconess program, she was pretty much, I'm not sure about the right word, but she loved that program, and she loved what she learned from there, and she really hoped it would continue. But it's difficult to accept some changes when you're close to 88 years old. And I can appreciate that, since when I was in nursing school, some people were talking about, wiping out or discontinuing all of the 3-year programs. So my heart was with her on that a little bit. But I'm glad we have the programs we have available and the opportunities available for women in the church. Because when she was a deaconess, we did not have any female priests. Next slide is basically my references, really. Because I said that, I guess the third slide in it was about the news article that I had a copy of. One of her nephews gave me information, and also members of Calvary Episcopal Church gave me information. And I would have to add, because I forgot to add him, my nephew on the Brown family side, who is living in Wyoming, at least helped me with the pronunciation of Ethete, Wyoming. So basically, I know I kind of went through this rather quickly. So I guess we're in tune for questions. If anyone has questions or anything to add even about the deaconess program that we have now. I'm sure others would like to. I've heard that there was questions about the deacon program.
If anyone would like to write a question, please write it in the chat. Someone wrote early on that the picture that you had of her looked like a nursing outfit that regular nurses wore at that time too. So it probably was a similar thing.
Right, and some of them did nursing missionary work, and as she helped, she was available during babies being born. I'm going back to that picture. There we go. Is that the one that was mentioned?
I'm not sure. It probably was the one
Yeah.
you showed. I don't know.
Yeah, and the one years later, this one with the cross, it's slide number 3. And yes, it does remind you of some nurses' uniforms from the 1930s.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And on this slide number 3 is also that I get the rug that she hung on her wall. That was a gift from the Indians.
Right. Beautiful.
It is gorgeous. I just wish I know when she mentioned that painting, I had not ever seen it.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, this newspaper article didn't have a picture of that either.
Nancy Houston asked, did I understand you to say that there are some deaconesses in the Episcopal Church? I mean, I can answer that. And I think this is what you said, Barbara, that no, when the church finally accepted women as deacons and priests, the deaconesses that were out ministering were able to be ordained a deacon.
Yes, and slide number 4 has the. I'm sorry, that's the wrong slide. That's setting up the deaconess programs. I'll find that slide and let you. Let me get
But
to
this
that.
was a wonderful program because women could not be ordained.
True.
Yeah. So then when they could, that's what most of them did.
The slide number 4 has limitations. No, that's not it. It's slide number 6 that has the limitations from that time because they couldn't function liturgically as our
Right.
female deaconesses function today.
I think she also had a question from Sandra.
I can't see the questions.
No, but you can hear. I think what she said was what were her objections to being incorporated into the Order of Deacons?
I think that was because she was so, I don't know, emotionally invested in the deaconess program that she attended. And she was being resistant to that change. She wasn't the only one who refused to be grandfathered in.
And of course, we know now also that the program for deaconesses was truly for women to do ministry to the poor, the sick, the needy. And the order of deacons in the church it also is not only for permanent deacons, but it's also for a stepping stone to the priesthood, that the church had decided that they would do it this way. And so if you've been to General Convention in the last several times, there is a debate about this. There are some who would like to eliminate the ordination to the diaconate so that there will not be the confusion between the two different kinds of deacons. But the House of Bishops does not want to touch that. So I think it'll stay this way for a while.
Yeah, I believe that Aunt Marian, pardon me for calling her Aunt Marian, because that's how I view her. Anyway, I believe she was, I think, really invested in the social work aspect
Mhm.
and the missionary aspects of the program that she was involved in. And at her point, she didn't believe in women priests either. So,
Mhm. Mhm.
well, and she wasn't the only one who refused to be grandfathered in.
Sure. Yeah. We have on our board a deacon. Cecily, want to wave your hand? And she is of the order of the permanent deacons, which would have had as their predecessors the deaconesses.
And I've met Cecily, and she's from my state.
Yeah, yeah. But being a priest myself, and I was ordained a deacon, and then 6 months later a priest. I totally understand the controversy about that. It's not that I don't believe I should have been doing good works and working with the poor and disenfranchised, but I know that my calling was to the priesthood, and so that becomes the controversy. Any more questions? Okay, let's see what we got here. Did Marian comment about the lack of financial support for deaconesses?
Not to my knowledge.
Where did she get her support? From the diocese or
I
what?
believe from the diocese.
Okay.
I mean, I could be wrong, but that's, I don't know totally. I don't know if it could, if someone there knows, I'd be happy to hear that. I don't. And there was, I don't know, I had mentioned to Robin that one of the other speakers, and I don't know if she's here for this program, had contacted me and said that she had actually met her when her mother was doing an article.
Oh, really? Ooh. Is somebody on board that had met her?
Well, somebody who was, someone who,
And
another speaker, and I can't remember her name.
Mhm.
So if she happened to, come in today, I would be happy for her to speak up about her memory. I think she told me she was a child and she went with her mother to do this article.
I see.
But I guess she's not here today.
Any other questions or comments? Sandra Squire said that Nancy Houston is also a deacon in Nebraska. Okay.
Chime in, deacons. I'd like to hear.
Okay.
Okay, well, I had said this would probably be a little shorter than the usual length of time. Because when I
Well,
rehearsed,
that's all right.
Hmm?
Just a moment. I'm reading a comment here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Joan Gunderson writes that the newsletter of the Deaconess Order reported that Marian Brown was ordered a deaconess on June the 8th, 1939 in Philadelphia.
Yes.
Is that, yeah, you've got that. It was quite possible she graduated from the Philadelphia training program earlier and worked for several years before taking orders. Is that right? Or did she take her orders first? Do you know, Barbara?
I'm not sure about that. Well, I think no, she went to the was it St. John's? Let's see where I went to. Oh, give me a second to find that slide. Yeah, she graduated in 1931. And her assignment was to St. John's House to work for social work. And that was her postgraduate work from the Deaconess School. And does that answer that question?
Well, but what Joan has here is that she was ordered a deaconess on June 8th, 1939. Is that incorrect, or is your other date incorrect?
I don't have information on that. I know she was ordered to
Okay.
go to the missionary work in 1939, but she graduated in 31.
Okay, well, that's probably the difference then.
Yeah. No, she was a deaconess. They were all considered deaconess when they graduated.
Right. Because it wasn't an ordination
No.
as what happens today. Nancy Houston said, I am a deacon, and I have reread the ordination for deacons in the Book of Common Prayer today, and it states beautifully and well what a deacon is called to do. Yes, you are absolutely right. Hence the controversy for those who wish to not ordain priests as deacons first, because that isn't their primary calling. But I don't see it changing.
Joanne, there's a message from Constant Ott as well. Do you see hers?
There it is. Okay. Okay, Constance Ott says the history of the Episcopal Church has many groups that have had long history. Then times have changed and organizations have ceased because of changing times. I was not aware of the organization of deaconesses. Well, good. I'm glad that you could find out more about it, but you're absolutely right that change is something that will always happen, but we don't always want it to happen.
Right. My slide, let's see what slide number. I can't tell what that's. Call to service. Oh, slide 11. That's when she was called to go work with the Indians in 1939. But from all that I could find, now I'm not saying that this, I'm just based on what the research I found, but they were not ordained at this time. That
Right.
wasn't until
Right.
later.
She was already retired, wasn't she? When they started ordaining deacons? Or am
Yeah,
I
I
wrong?
think that's
Yeah.
no, I think that's close to that time range,
Uh-huh.
or which number that was.
There's also a question from Alexa Laramonder.
Okay. Let me see. What kind of classes were taught at the Deaconess School? I think you did say that, but
I did
refresh-
that.
Yeah.
Give me a second to say which slide that number that is, because I'm still on my program. And that may be a question from someone who came in a little later. Their coursework included religious training, Bible service, pastoral care, and social work. So a lot of what they did was more in the social work line, not ordained. Yeah, that's the only slide that I have on what was covered in the classes.
Mhm. Do you know how long they went? How many years or what?
Well, she graduated in 39. I believe it was the 1930 census where I found her name in Philadelphia and with a bunch of other people. And I went, what is that? So that's when I found out about the school. So she joined it, before 1930.
Okay.
There are
It
a
may have been
couple of, yeah,
Is that when she went to school?
She was a class yeah.
Joan Gunderson indicates that until the deaconesses were actually part of a setting apart ceremony, then they weren't actually called a deaconess, I guess.
Yeah.
Joanne, there's also a message about the Daughters of the King.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. In 1920s, the Order of the Daughters of the King started the Master Fund in order to grant small scholarships to women attending deaconess schools. Well, how wonderful. At the time, many deaconesses joined the order. Okay,
And
that's a good thing.
Sandra has another comment after that.
Okay, let's see. There are deaconess hospital, not necessarily Episcopal. Were these established and staffed by deaconesses?
And Connie Ott asking another question.
Yes, and that's the same question that we had a minute ago. How long was the education process? And you're not sure, I guess, right?
Right. Because and when I was trying to research that, I did not find that time. I didn't find that. And since she was no longer available for me to ask, I couldn't ask. I don't remember her telling me exactly when she joined that program.
And since these were people who were out in the community doing such wonderful ministries, they may not have taken a set time to do this. They may have taken a course here and a course there that they could fit into their schedule. I could see that being the case. Okay, Janet Crosmere says that there's Deaconess Hospital in Spokane, Washington. Is that still called that and it's still functioning today? Janet? She doesn't know. Okay.
There's also a thing about,
Nancy Houston says that Emmanuel Hospital in Omaha was a Lutheran hospital, and there was a wall to the women who founded the hospital. So probably they were, some at least, deaconesses.
and that there was the comment about when the diaconate actually became,
Yes, the 1970,
Yeah.
right,
Right. And she was still alive in 70,
right.
but she had retired. Now, I think the discussion of, whatever else other people are adding to this, program to me, that's interesting because I tried hard to find more, I spent more time trying to find more information specific to Aunt Marian. And I may have, glanced over some other things. That really
Okay,
didn't apply to her.
it was added that the Lutheran diaconess order were the ones with the hospitals.
Ah,
And Grace Sears says Lutherans imported deaconesses from Germany into Pennsylvania in the mid-19th century. And there's another comment from Betty Lane that there's a diaconess hospital in Boston.
oh, yes. I'm aware of that.
So it's obvious that the deaconesses made their mark on the church and were very important in ministry in their day, in their time, as the ordained deacons are today. I certainly don't want to leave them out.
Yeah. And I would add that there's plenty of, Indigenous American citizens who are Episcopalians out west
Because
because
of the deaconesses.
I would like to think so.
Well, we got here that, let's see, a couple more. The Philadelphia school program was 2 years.
Ah,
Here's one that Diaconess Hospital is also in Billings, Montana. Okay. And women will act for the good of all. We can't be kept down. Well, what a wonderful, wonderful comment to close our program. Thank you so much, Barbara. This was so informative, and I think the discussion was rich. I appreciate you being with us. And I would like to end by saying to all of you, if you're interested in working on a closer way with women's history in the Episcopal Church, please join our organization. And the money we get from this is used for grants and to further the research and gathering of papers and videos and audios of women. So we're committed to helping and keeping the history of Episcopal women. So thank you again. I hope you will join us next week when Heather Huck will go over and tell us about the ordination of the Philadelphia 11.
and thank you all for, letting me share one of my favorite people.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.